five-star general stands alone on a Philippine beach, watching enemy ships disappear into darkness. His promise echoes across time. I shall return. But destiny would demand a price higher than anyone could have imagined. What drives a man to defy presidents, rewrite military doctrine, and risk everything for glory? Douglas MacArthur's story isn't just about war. It's about the dangerous seduction of absolute power and the price of unchecked ambition. Arkansas, 1880. A military brat named Douglas inherits more than his father's uniform. He inherits an unshakable belief that Providence chose him to reshape history through sheer force of will and strategic brilliance. Picture this: a boy memorizing Napoleon's campaigns before mastering multiplication tables. Young Douglas MacArthur doesn't study war. He devours it, seeing himself not as student, but as destiny's chosen instrument of battlefield transformation. West Point, 1903. Cadet MacArthur graduates first in his class, yet classmates whisper behind closed doors. Brilliant? Undoubtedly. Arrogant beyond measure? That fatal flaw would define everything that followed in his extraordinary career. The Philippines beckon like forbidden fruit. Young Lieutenant MacArthur arrives believing he understands conquest. These tropical islands would become his obsession, teaching harsh lessons about pride, sacrifice, and empire's true cost to rulers and ruled. Consider the mathematics of heroism. World War I transforms ambitious officer into proven legend. MacArthur leads from the front, collecting medals like trophies, but each victory feeds an appetite that grows more ravenous with success. Between wars, he becomes America's youngest general at 45. Yet MacArthur carries secret knowledge. His greatest battles lie ahead, in places he cannot imagine, against enemies he has never faced before. December 7, 1941. Japanese bombers shatter Pearl Harbor's dawn. For MacArthur, commanding Philippine forces, this isn't another war. It's his personal duel with destiny, played on history's grandest and most unforgiving stage. You face impossible mathematics. Retreat abandons thousands of Filipino soldiers who trusted you completely. Staying means certain death or humiliating capture. MacArthur chooses a third option: strategic withdrawal while swearing sacred vengeance and eventual return. Bataan becomes a graveyard of American dreams. Soldiers march into captivity while their commander escapes by torpedo boat under cover of darkness. Critics scream abandonment. MacArthur calls it survival for a greater, more noble purpose. Australia, March 1942. A defeated general steps onto foreign soil, uniform wrinkled, pride intact. 3 words will define the next 3 years of brutal Pacific warfare: I shall return to the Philippines. Island hopping wasn't just military strategy. For MacArthur, each captured atoll represented something deeper. Proof that he could bend geography itself to his indomitable will, transforming the Pacific Ocean into his personal chessboard of redemption. Guadalcanal, Bougainville, New Guinea. Names once meaningless become bloody stepping stones toward redemption. MacArthur doesn't merely fight Japanese forces. He battles his own demons of perceived failure and the weight of abandoned promises to dying soldiers. Here's what textbooks omit. MacArthur personally plans every amphibious assault, studying invasion maps until dawn breaks, treating each landing like chess where human lives hang in balance, and one miscalculation means catastrophic defeat. October 20th, 1944. MacArthur wades ashore at Lady Beach while photographers capture the moment for eternity. But examine his eyes closely. They reveal not triumph, but obsessive focus on the unfinished business ahead. Manila burns as American forces advance through rubble-strewn streets. MacArthur watches his adopted city die, understanding that some victories cost more than defeats. Liberation leaves scars that decades cannot heal or time erase. Inside the general's mind lives a profound contradiction: genuine love for Filipino people alongside ruthless calculation that treats civilian suffering as acceptable collateral damage for strategic objectives and personal vindication through military triumph. September 2, 1945. Japanese surrender aboard USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. MacArthur speaks eloquently of peace while secretly planning his next conquest, not of territory, but of legacy itself through history's judgment. Post-war Japan becomes MacArthur's laboratory for massive social engineering experiments. Supreme Commander sounds like a military title, but he governs like an emperor, remaking entire culture according to his personal vision of democratic Western civilization. Something curious happens in occupied Japan. The man who authorized atomic bombs becomes beloved liberator, introducing women's rights, labor unions, and constitutional democracy to people who once worshipped military authoritarianism and emperor worship. Yet beneath apparent benevolence lurks familiar arrogance. MacArthur rules from Tokyo headquarters like a medieval shogun, rarely leaving the building, conducting all business through ceremonial audiences that reinforce his almost supernatural authority over subjects. June 25, 1950. North Korean forces cross the 38th parallel like wolves descending on sheep. President Truman summons MacArthur to command United Nations forces. Two titans begin a collision course toward constitutional crisis. Have you ever watched two alpha wolves circle each other, neither willing to show weakness? Truman represents civilian control of military power. MacArthur embodies warrior king tradition. Only one can survive this fundamental ideological conflict. September 15, 1950. Incheon landing showcases MacArthur's tactical genius perfectly. Amphibious assault behind enemy lines transforms near defeat into stunning victory. But success intoxicates the 70-year-old general, clouding judgment about China's growing involvement. Chinese volunteers pour across frozen Yalu River like an unstoppable human flood. MacArthur's triumphant advance toward total victory becomes desperate retreat through Korean mountains. His reputation crumbles with each mile of abandoned territory and defeated expectations. Winter, 1950-51. American soldiers freeze in brutal Korean mountains while their commander demands permission to bomb Chinese bases across international borders. MacArthur sees only military solutions to fundamentally political problems. The general's letters to Congress deliberately bypass presidential authority, violating the sacred constitutional principle of civilian leadership over military power. MacArthur believes his battlefield genius transcends political constraints. History will judge who was ultimately right. Picture this scene. President Truman sits alone in the Oval Office, reading MacArthur's latest insubordinate message. The decision crystallizes slowly: fire America's most famous general or surrender constitutional government to unchecked military pride and dangerous ambition. April 11, 1951. Radio broadcasts carry shocking news across America. President Truman relieves Douglas MacArthur of all military commands immediately. A living legend falls from grace, victim of his own inability to accept limitations. MacArthur's homecoming becomes triumph disguised as humiliating defeat. Ticker-tape parades in major cities prove Americans love their heroes complicated, flawed, and boldly defiant of political authority they themselves sometimes distrust and question openly. Congress provides the perfect stage for MacArthur's final performance before the American people. His farewell address quotes an old British barracks ballad, "Old soldiers never die, they just fade away." Poetry softens political rebellion's harsh edges. But fading away proves impossible for someone who lived his entire life in history's brilliant spotlight. MacArthur retreats to New York's luxurious Waldorf Towers, watching America change dramatically without his once guiding hand and strategic vision. Years pass like autumn leaves. The Korean War ends in the predicted stalemate. The Vietnam War begins with mistakes he might have prevented. History slowly validates some of his most controversial strategic insights and prescient warnings. A philosophical question haunts MacArthur's final years. Does genius justify insubordination against elected authority? Can military effectiveness excuse dangerous political arrogance? His life embodies democracy's eternal struggle between competence and constitutional accountability. May 12, 1962. MacArthur returns to West Point for his final speech to cadets. Students see not a controversial political figure, but living embodiment of military honor, personal courage, and ultimate sacrifice. Duty, honor, country. His final words to future officers echo across the Hudson River Valley. These aren't merely military virtues, but human ideals, complicated by the man who exemplified both their promise and their peril. Death comes quietly to the warrior who lived loudly throughout his extraordinary career. April 5, 1964, Walter Reed Hospital. MacArthur's last battle ends not with victory or defeat, but with acceptance of mortality's ultimate authority. His funeral procession stretches for miles through Washington's crowded streets. Mourning crowds gather to honor a complicated legacy, brilliant strategist, controversial commander, deeply flawed human being who changed 2 wars and 1 proud nation. What do we remember when we remember Douglas MacArthur today? The tactical genius who revolutionized amphibious warfare? The insubordinate general who defied civilian authority? Both versions exist simultaneously, defying simple historical judgment. Consider this profound paradox. MacArthur's greatest victories came from understanding enemy weaknesses perfectly, yet his ultimate defeat came from misunderstanding his own dangerous strengths. Pride lifted him higher than eagles soar. The Philippines still honor him as liberator from Japanese occupation. Japan remembers him as benevolent democratic reformer. Korea remains tragically divided partly because of his strategic miscalculations. Legacy depends on your vantage point. MacArthur's military innovations, island-hopping strategy, combined arms coordination, joint service cooperation became standard doctrine worldwide. His political misjudgments serve as cautionary tales about unchecked ambition and constitutional boundaries, protecting democratic governance from military overreach. Young officers today study his campaigns in war colleges across the globe. They learn tactical brilliance from MacArthur's spectacular successes, political wisdom from his catastrophic failures. Education extracts equal value from triumph and tragedy. But here's what history textbooks cannot teach: the crushing weight of command decisions sending thousands to death, the burden of promises that entire nations expect you to keep regardless of cost. MacArthur understood something most people never learn: that history judges not just your actions, but your willingness to act decisively when others hesitate. Greatness requires risks that ordinary mortals find absolutely unthinkable. Yet risk-taking without wisdom becomes reckless endangerment of everything you swore to protect. MacArthur's career perfectly illustrates the razor-thin line between necessary strategic boldness and dangerous overconfidence that recognizes no legitimate earthly authority. His relationship with power revealed democracy's fundamental tension. We desperately need strong leaders to protect us, but strong leaders inevitably threaten the very freedoms they're constitutionally sworn to defend against all enemies. Think about the man behind those glittering medals and ribbons. MacArthur loved theater, quoted poetry extensively, understood that effective leadership requires performance as much as pure military competence and strategic thinking ability. This theatrical quality made him simultaneously effective and dangerous to democratic institutions. Soldiers followed MacArthur partly because he looked exactly like their idealized conception of what generals should be: tall, dramatic, unshakably confident. But theater can become reality's inescapable prison. MacArthur may have started believing his own carefully crafted mythology, forgetting that even five-star generals remain mortal humans subject to error and fatal misjudgment. His staff officers spoke reverently of MacArthur's ability to work 18-hour days well into his 70s, his photographic memory for military details, his genuine concern for soldiers under his direct command. They also whispered nervously about his desperate need for constant praise, his complete inability to tolerate dissent, his tendency to surround himself with yes-men who told him what he wanted to hear. Perhaps MacArthur's greatest tragedy wasn't his public dismissal by Truman, but his gradual isolation from reality by subordinates too intimidated to challenge his increasingly dangerous assumptions about political and military power. The Korean War might have ended differently if someone had possessed moral courage to tell MacArthur that his China strategy risked nuclear holocaust. Sometimes loyalty becomes betrayal when it enables catastrophic misjudgment. MacArthur's personal life remained largely private, overshadowed by his overwhelming public persona. Behind the general's uniform lived a man who struggled with the same insecurities and desires for recognition motivating ordinary people. His second marriage to Jean MacArthur provided stability his military career couldn't offer. She understood that living with a legend meant accepting that history would always compete for her husband's attention and ultimate loyalty. Their son Arthur grew up in the shadow of impossible expectations. How do you establish your own identity when your father's name appears in history textbooks? Legacy can become a burden as heavy as honor. MacArthur's relationship with his own mortality remained complicated until the very end. He spoke frequently about honor and sacrifice, yet seemed genuinely surprised when death claimed him like any other mortal. The final irony: MacArthur spent his entire life preparing for war, but never learned to make peace with subordinates, superiors, or himself. His greatest enemy wasn't Japanese or Chinese, but his own pride. Today, military academies teach MacArthur's tactical innovations, while political science classes analyze his constitutional violations. He succeeded and failed so completely that both lessons remain eternally relevant for American democratic society. We live in MacArthur's world, where military technology can destroy civilizations, where democratic nations must balance security needs with constitutional limitations, where individual genius clashes with institutional wisdom and collective judgment. His ghost haunts every civil-military crisis, every moment when democratic nations must choose between effectiveness and accountability, between winning wars and preserving political systems that make victory meaningful rather than Pyrrhic. Douglas MacArthur changed the Pacific War, transformed post-war Japan, and challenged American democracy's foundations. His life proves that history's most important figures are often its most complicated, brilliant, flawed, and utterly irreplaceable. In the end, MacArthur remains what he always was: a mirror reflecting our deepest fears about power, our highest aspirations for leadership, and the eternal human struggle between greatness and the humility that greatness requires.